Our special guest this morning is Nicole Miller. Nicole is the principal of MnM Consulting. She is a communications professional with nearly 2 decades of experience creating targeted publicity and marketing campaigns for a range of clients in private industry and the nonprofit sector. She has a bachelor's degree in arts, media, and culture from the University of Washington and a Master of Science in Publishing from Pace University in New York. MnM Consulting specializes in media development, digital and print publishing, brand strategy, content creation, and clean energy sustainability education for business and general audiences. MnM Consulting works with several small business, government, and nonprofit clients on brand development, project management, event coordination, and product deployment. A Newark resident, Nicole serves as an appointee of the governor on the Clean Buildings Working Group. In addition, she is the vice chair of the New Jersey Progressive Equitable Energy Coalition, co-chair of the Jersey Waterworks Steering Committee, statewide coalition focused on improving New Jersey's aging water infrastructure, chair of the Newark Green Team, co-chair of NewarkDIG, or Doing Infrastructure Green, which is dedicated to resilient and sustainable municipal stormwater management, and a member of the Newark Environmental Commission, which advises the mayor and city council on sustainability issues. Nicole's going to begin our conversation, and then we'll open it up for your comments and questions. Welcome, Nicole, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Ms. Carla, for that great introduction. It's a little awkward when somebody read your bio, right? Right. I probably wouldn't have said all of that. But as Ms. Carla mentioned, I have several hats over water and energy. Nicole Miller, principal consultant of MnM Consulting. I live in Newark, Pam here in the West Ward, the best ward. I've lived here for 20 years. This is my 20-year anniversary. Moving here, I have generations here. My father and my mother both born and raised. My grandmother born and raised. But I was born elsewhere and came back to go to graduate school. And Ms. Carla invited me, and it's difficult to figure out what exactly to talk about. And so I decided kind of to talk about a little bit of everything. So I have a lot of slides, and I'm going to power through them. If you could just hold your questions, but don't forget them, write them down or something like that, so that we can save some time towards the end. Let me pull up my deck here. Let me know that you can see it. Okay. Is it showing the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes, I see it.
Awesome. So, as was mentioned, my name is Nicole Miller, and I'm principal consultant of MnM Consulting. And my talk is navigating environmental concerns in Newark, which is very broad. I have several hats, but I'll focus on Newark, my Newark connections, which are NewarkDIG, the Newark Green Team, and the Newark Environmental Commission. It's always a point of pride for me to see these logos lined up because there's different aspects of the city and different sustainability issues that are dealt with under each of these headings. But the first question I wanted to ask is, what does it take to transform a city? And if you look, this slide is meant to be a little overwhelming. There are so many different things. We're talking about energy and transportation, of course, open space, urban planning, having active, engaged, and empowered residents, having healthy food access, making sure that we can take care of any sort of pollution concerns that we have in toxicity, waste reduction, open communication channels, ways to handle emergencies, etc. All of those things are necessary, but I think key among them is recognizing that Newark is an environmental justice community. That can be a difficult point for some people to wrap their minds around. It's not a matter of, oh, it's an environmental justice community just because there are Black people here. It's not an environmental justice community just because there are poor people here. There's some contention about chicken or egg, but several of us are firmly convinced that because there are poor people, there are people who are of limited income, as well as people of minority status, Black and brown people here, then that has created the environmental justice reality. So when you have industry combined with lax regulation or things that are not regulated, or where industry is placed here, where you have a lack of affordable housing, or that affordable housing is in industrialized or commercial areas, where there's toxicity that's built up over years, and the resulting health effects that go along with that, including cancer, learning disabilities, asthma, and then all of those we call cumulative impacts. And that's when you're stacking these environmental concerns, and they are segregating people based on their minority status or their income. That's when you get an environmental justice community. So what does that really mean? You really are talking about historical challenges and the cumulative impacts. So of course, industrial waste, the legacy of pollution, air and soil and water degradation. Of course, that's also combined with racial and economic segregation and disenfranchisement, which result in environmental concerns, as I mentioned, and are also coupled with social and criminal justice targeting. These things all combine together. So in Newark, you have, of course, decades of toxic air. As one example, I mean, we need a whole workshop. We need a whole full day workshop to talk about all the various things that are affecting Newark, between soil toxicity, air, water, etc. So let's start with air. Newark, of course, is an important economic powerhouse. The people in Newark might not necessarily know that, but it's true. They don't feel it in their daily lives, but they do experience it in their toxicity and the health effects that they have, because Newark has the second busiest port in the nation. It has an international airport. It's the nexus for commerce. We're in the megapolis between Boston and Washington, D.C. And so 20 minutes from Manhattan, we're very much a key city between airport, truck lines, and of course, millions of people in a relatively small area. We're the largest and most dense city here in the state of New Jersey, and yet, New Jersey does not have a major metropolitan city of its own, because it has New York to the north and Philadelphia to the south and west, and those act as feeder cities. And so what we find is that New Jersey, Newark, especially as a microcosm, ends up bearing the brunt of many of the effects of industry. So this is a map that actually we took from the from Newark's Environmental Resources Inventory. Excuse me, highlighting air toxics, cancers risks. And you can see on the screen here this dark purple section where people say, oh, generally people don't live here. That's not true. People do live down here. They're very few and far between in these darker bands, but you can see that there's in Newark, we have the Turnpike, we have 78, we have the airport, we have the port, we have 280 along the front, we have the Parkway. There's so much history tied to this map alone. And you see the air toxics, cancer risk. All of the city is in some level of risk. And actually the least risky areas are up here where I live, this lighter band. And just to, if you continue to the west there, you run into South Orange, Maplewood, which are much more suburbanized areas. But as you go east, you're running up into the port, the airport, and all of those industrial areas in the south and east wards, which are most affected. And so if you were going to talk about the cumulative impacts, you see these two slides very much mirror each other. So in that same area where you saw the air toxics cancers risk, the air cancers toxics risk, you see that we also have recycling facilities and waste to energy incinerators, which I'll talk about here in a moment. These are the kinds of issues that we want to address. We have, for example, PM 2.5 concentrations, which are inundating this map, as you can see. There's the land surface air temperature that you can see as a result. Just right outside of Newark to the north, you see South Orange. There's a lot of bands of green here. Within the city, you might see a few bands of blue and green. Those are Weequahic Park and Branchbrook Park, respectively. But look at the south and the east wards here. You can see that it's very much hotter than the surrounding areas. The known contamination site list. These are all, as I mentioned, maps from the environmental resources inventory. And this is a very conservative compilation of these sites, unfortunately. But Newark has 4 Superfund sites and hundreds of brownfields that need to be remediated. In addition to that, when you have these sites that are toxic, they're also not being used for economic benefit. Newark is 95% renter. And so then you have landlords who are either senior citizens who are sort of sharing their multifamily home with a renter, but can't themselves maintain the properties and have to rely on contractors, or you have landlords who may be absentee, who may be out-of-state landlords or corporate landlords who are not necessarily taking care of the properties. So we have aging home stock as well. Flooding is another concern. We have the FEMA flood zones here. You can see a good portion of the city is below sea level, and they're well within the 100 and 500-year flood zones or the floodways for some of these rivers. We have the Passaic River running right along there, and the Elizabeth River runs up here in this area where I live up in the West Ward, and there are flooding concerns with both of those. Then when we talk about flooding, we have the drainage districts for combined sewer overflows, which I'll talk about in a moment as well. Yet another outlet for more toxins that the city is suffering with. Hazardous waste sites, which are different from contaminated sites. These are sites that are sort of actively producing hazardous waste through whatever their industry might be. So a generator or transfer facility, transporter, treatment, storage, or disposal kind of facility. And of course, the 4 Superfund sites, Riverside Industrial Park, Diamond Alkali, the Troy Chemical Company, and the White Chemical Corporation, 2 of which are along the Passaic River itself. Brownfield sites, as I mentioned, and this is a QR code that can take you to the environmental resources inventory for you to take a look at that. I can share this with with Ms. Carla, and she can share that with the group a little bit later. But let's focus on the Ironbound for right now. These are just waste locations in the Ironbound. And when we talk about air quality, we talk about Covanta. Covanta is the waste to energy facility, and you may have heard about protests regarding their permit. This is an ongoing concern here in the city of Newark that their permit might be renewed. The city of Newark passed an environmental justice cumulative impacts ordinance a decade ago, and just in 2020, the state of New Jersey passed a statewide environmental justice and cumulative impacts ordinance, but only just recently in the last 12 months were the rules engaged for that statewide legislation. And so Covanta, along with a few others, got their permits in before the rules were solidified. Those EJ rules would have given the Department of Environmental Protection more leeway to direct these kinds of facilities to monitor their waste, to reduce their waste, and or they would be able to deny those permits. And so the people of Newark are still currently fighting to get the DEP to be more restrictive, but unfortunately they are caught in sort of a legal in-between place right now. And there are challenges currently happening to that EJ bill. And so we'll be keeping an eye on that as well. But burning trash is not renewable energy. Covanta, as you can see on the red dot here, is supposedly waste to energy. They do receive renewable energy credits. So they get paid from the state of New Jersey for burning trash in the city of Newark. And we saw the air toxic cancer risk. We saw the PM 2.5. They are releasing these kinds of chemicals and this toxic air into the East Ward and the South Ward. And they're getting paid to do this, like not just from their clients, but also as renewable energy credits. When we talk about waste reduction, that's one of the elements that the Newark Green Team definitely is working on. Burning trash is not one of those options. In addition to that, these facilities are not good neighbors, right? So Covanta, Essex is emits arsenic, hydrogen, chloride, mercury, and nitrogen oxides, beryllium, carbon tetrachloride, lead, sulfur dioxide, and of course carbon monoxide. And this is just one of these several facilities across the state, and several community partners, Ironbound Community Corporation based here in Newark, of course, the New Jersey Environmental Justice Alliance with their lawyers, Earth Justice, are currently have an amicus brief to support the environmental justice law and its rulemaking, but those rules are under attack right now to prevent this kind of facility from being enacted. Actually, just this week, there was a clean energy standard bill that was passed, and co-pollutants, which all of these are considered co-pollutants, NOx and beryllium, carbon tetrachloride, all of these, lead and sulfur dioxide, all of these are considered co-pollutants, which had not been considered in the clean energy standard, would now be considered, which is a great win for environmental justice groups and environmental groups across the state. And so just thinking about air quality, those are the kinds of elements that the city, that the folks in the city, the Newark Environmental Commission is concerned about. We're looking into, we've had several hearings on them and talk about them regularly so that we can sort of figure out what are the policy ways in which we can intervene. I do want to talk about flooding for a moment. So going on to NewarkDIG, excuse me. NewarkDIG, we started in 2013, and we're focused on stormwater. Now, stormwater is rainwater or snow melt that falls, and generally people don't think about stormwater unless there's a flood. They only think about stormwater in that way, and what NewarkDIG is attempts to do is to make sure that people consider the effects of poorly managed stormwater as well as the benefits of well-managed stormwater. A stormwater in your combined sewer overflow is combined sewer system. A combined sewer overflow is when in a combined system, which a good portion of the city, especially along the Passaic River, is a combined system. That's when the dirty water from your home, from your sinks and toilets, etc., goes into the same large pipe as the water that falls on the ground outside, either from the rain or from snow melt. It goes down into the sewer system, and in an ideal scenario, goes to the water treatment facility so that it can be cleaned and then released back into the bay. Unfortunately, even with a small amount of rain here in Newark, that water can overwhelm the system, and it can take it, instead of going to the water treatment facility, it will overflow directly into the Passaic River or the Elizabeth River. And in the worst cases, it can back up into the streets and into people's homes and basements. This is an unacceptable situation, obviously. It makes stormwater a burden. It causes flooding, it causes toxicity, and it definitely is not something that generally people consider a resource. But stormwater can be a resource when it's well managed. And NewarkDIG, we firmly believe that green infrastructure solutions are one way to manage stormwater. And so green infrastructure might include curb bump outs, rain barrels, rain gardens, green roofs, of course, planting trees and other plants. Our community gardens are excellent for that, especially when we combine that with the structures that might be adjacent to those community gardens, taking that water, filtering it through a cistern, and being able to use it within that community garden. As you can see, some of the cisterns here in this lower image, these lower images right here. And then, of course, porous pavement. NewarkDIG has been working with the city for several years on its long-term control plan to manage combined sewer overflows, as well as developing a green infrastructure program. And we're very happy to say that Newark has committed to managing 214 acres of public property with green infrastructure. They have also, with Newark Green Works, worked on a workforce development program where they can train local residents on a national green infrastructure certification program. And we'll be launching next month at the Southward Environmental Alliance Environmental Summit, a new green infrastructure program in collaboration with the city. And I do hope that any of you who are able to attend SWIA's event are able to come out and support this and spread the news about this great opportunity. But when we think about green infrastructure, how is that connected to the air quality that we talked about before? Well, I'll tell you right now that those the maps that I showed that had the increased urban heat island effect, the air quality management, of course, all of the roadways, what green infrastructure has an opportunity to do, as well as, of course, tree planting in general, has an opportunity to create buffers. And so you can reduce, of course, the flooding risks with green infrastructure, but also improve the air quality by planting trees and other plants that are absorptive, that can help to increase the green space within the city. Right now, Newark is like 75% paved. And the problem with that is that that creates very non-reflective surfaces. And so the heat just sort of bakes into Newark. And so just coming up South Orange Avenue, you can see a very stark difference when you leave Newark and enter South Orange, for example, coming up South Orange Avenue. And so what the aim is to increase green infrastructure across the city. Some of NewarkDIG's current initiatives include of course, our GI reformer team, our green infrastructure apprenticeship program, where we take the Newark Green Works folks and are putting them to work. We, of course, do local and statewide policy, and we do our own green infrastructure projects, one of which is happening, of course, down on the Fairmont Avenue, right by the Cityplex 12. And we have a few more that we'll be announcing next month as well. And so what do we really need to do to make sure that these initiatives happen? In addition to acknowledging the previous injustice, in addition to implementing solutions such as green infrastructure and recognizing stormwater as a resource, perhaps we need to reclaim our space, those brownfields that I mentioned. That's economic development that isn't being borne by the city. It's really, those are spaces that are laying fallow and we can make them useful. Brownfield reclamation increases, of course, local tax revenue, gives us opportunities. This park, which I'm sure most of you have visited down where the orange sticks are along the Passaic River, was all brownfield wasteland, right? And so now it's an active and viable part of the community, and we can do this all over the city. There are other issues, right? So lead in the home. How can homes that were built before 1978, how can we let people know that, oh, there's a lot of conversation about lead in the water, and our lead service line replacement program was a great success. It's been touted nationally, despite the current sort of hiccups that we're dealing with some poor contractor decisions. That project has done an excellent job in moving us forward. But the even greater danger for lead is in the homes. And there's, of course, behavioral and emotional and physiological damage that is a direct result of that we have experienced over the generations. So all of these are issues that the Green Team, the NewarkDIG, and the Newark Environmental Commission all work regularly to address. And as I mentioned, we would need a whole workshop for me to keep going and talk about all of them. I had to pick just a few to highlight as issues, unfortunately. But I do want to make sure that people stay engaged. And how can people be engaged? First of all, be educated about the dangers and be informed about solutions. So it's not just enough to be panicked and sort of scared of what the potential dangers are. Really, there are solutions out there when we can work together, when we can empower and engage our elected officials to make good decisions and spend our budgets wisely. Of course, that means having a seat at that table, right? Having connected representation, working together, we can really have the effect that we want. And it's, of course, important to know what's a burden and what is a benefit or an opportunity. So I'll wrap up by saying that the Environmental Commission meets the second Wednesday of the month at 6 p.m. NewarkDIG, we meet on the fourth Tuesday of the month at 11 a.m. And the Green Team, we actually have our next meeting next Wednesday, the third Wednesday of the month at 4 p.m. And you can reach all of us here. And so I'll stop there. I know it was a lot. Just powered through. But I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Nicole, for informing us greatly. And I know you were giving us the quick version of your presentation, but can you share those dates of your meetings with Ms. Carla, and then she can disseminate them out to persons on this call or persons who may be interested in that information.
Absolutely. The DIG dates and the Green Team dates haven't changed, but the Environmental Commission dates did change recently. We used to meet on the first Wednesday, and now we meet on the second Wednesday. And there's a special link, and I'll share all of that with Ms. Carla.
And what time on the second Wednesday?
6 p.m. for the Environmental Commission meeting.
And the fourth Tuesday, that's NewarkDIG, or is that the Green
NewarkDIG?
Team?
Yes, NewarkDIG on the fourth Tuesday at 11 a.m.
And all these meetings are via Zoom or
All
phone call?
Zoom right now. Yeah. Once they gave me a Zoom option, I was like, I'll take that. Thanks.
Is the Green Team also, is that also monthly?
Yes. So that's the third Wednesday at 4 p.m.
Oh, okay.
Sounds like a plan, Nicole. Sounds like a
There's a lot
great
going
plan.
on. There's a lot going on.
Mhm.
And the South Ward event that I mentioned, the annual summit, is on April 27th. And that's all day. It's down at 55 Ludlow Street this year.
Oh, inside close to Weekly Park.
Wow. Do you have to register for Ludlow?
I believe they do, and I can probably pull up that and put it in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
There is a registration.
Wait a minute. What day of the week is that?
What did you call that one? The Southward what?
The Southward Environmental Alliance Environmental Summit.
The summit. Okay.
I would encourage as many persons as possible to attend that, and also if there is a pre-registration, to pre-register, because
No. No, I'm already booked for the 27th. Okay.
That is Earth Week, so there's a lot going on.
Yes.
Newark, that's the link to the South Ward. I just put in the chat. That's the link to the South Ward event.
Yeah, I'm already
And
booked.
a flyer for that. Additionally, the Green Team is collecting Earth Week events. And so if United Parks is one or any of your associated organizations, I know Pam, there's a lot going on with Brookerati Group and several other organizations. If you're planning anything during Earth Week, please do let us know. I will put that in the chat as well.
Is there a cumulative calendar for Earth? I know it's always so hard because everybody's doing events that take a lot of work, but is there a quick cumulative calendar for people all around the state that needs to know that Newark is leading the way actively?
Well, that's what we're working on. So that's why we want people to send us your events. So we have several events already on our website at newarkgreenteam.org. And so we do hope that people will send us more. It says April 16th to the 22nd, but truthfully, it's most people are considering that, I think, the 21st through the 27th, and Earth Day is specifically the 22nd.
So the whole week of 21 to 27, yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, Nicole, this is so comprehensive and you touched everything. So I, of course, we wrote furiously, but can you, if you could back up, or I don't know what, raise up or something like that, and take into account that there's a lot of discussion of young people just being really dispirited for many reasons. So you have this great potential 17 to or 16 to 30-year-olds that are, so which would you say, can you make your go-to list of things that young people should really zero in on that would appeal to them and leverage the most addressing? I know this is, I mean, obviously there needs to be a lot of policy motion, and that is great news this week, but just in general, what are your top picks of things that can involve young people so that nobody is staying home?
Well, truthfully, Susan, I thank you for that question. Truthfully, there's so much for people to be engaged with that they can really follow their heart. What is their interest? I mean, are they interested in healthy food and food justice? We have a lot of young people who are choosing sort of meatless life for sustainability reasons and sort of following that down. We have a lot of awesome community gardens here in the city. We're building our composting relationships between these organizations. What does that mean for entrepreneurial effects later on? I know that the Coalition for Healthy Food in Newark Schools is expanding. There's a lot of great things happening there. And how are those elements connected? You know, pre-pandemic, there were a lot of movements to be able to, you know, incorporate healthy food into Newark schools. And, you know, after the pandemic, people got a little sort of skittish and they pulled back from a few things, but hopefully we can lean back in to that. If young people are interested in fashion, like how are we recycling textiles? How are we reducing overconsumption in general and handling waste? There's I think Ironbound Corporation is really diving into the zero waste world, and how can we at every stage of not just on the consumers, but also with the producers at every level, how can we reduce waste at every level so that by the time it gets to people, the entire burden of the system is not on them? How can we improve and make recycling the most economical choice? People talk about recycling, oh, it doesn't work, it works fine. What it is more expensive than using virgin materials. And so what we need to do is make the virgin materials more expensive, then they'll choose the recycled materials, right? And so because of the capitalist nature of our society, we have capitalist drivers. And so we need to work within that system until we can sort of change that system from within. Are people interested in sort of in energy and pure climate greenhouse gas mitigation and energy? There's a lot of work happening there. Talking about homes, people's home building decarbonization and electrification, key, massively important to be able to reach the climate goals that we have, making sure that people's homes are properly sealed so that they're highly efficient, and then getting them electrified to get some of those gas burning appliances. People don't know that their stove, we have 1 in 4 children in Newark have asthma. People don't know that every time they turn that stove on, they're aggravating the people who have cardiopulmonary problems and asthmatic issues because we're literally burning fossil fuels in the home, and there's effects from that. And so when we can improve the interior and exterior air quality, what would be the great benefits that we have as a result of that? So Susan, I can't necessarily point young people in one direction, but they should connect with a group like the Newark Green Team, where we have, that sort of full umbrella where we can engage with young people and really hope to see what they might be interested in. We're doing air quality monitoring, of course, working on land use and water, a whole bunch of different issues. Hope to answer your question.
Great. And do you articulate the UPAO ethos of reconnecting, helping to reconnect citizens to nature? And I'm speaking totally broadly on the whole, this whole our whole age is in a way, has become quite disconnected, partly devices, and we all know we're all at fault in a way. But I love UPAO's specificity about people just connecting citizens to the joy of creativity of green space, and that, I think, it's something major could be happening for young people there, because it's just really, it makes you, it just makes you sad when you're not connected to nature. But we don't want to, you don't want to force it. We're all, but can that, it sounds soft next to the really super active, and yet it's really important.
Well, you have to remember what it is that not only what we're fighting for, but what is truly protecting us. And it's hard to do that, when you're sort of in your concrete box, constantly. Sometimes it's important to go out and just sort of sit in nature to understand why it's important that we maintain wildlife habitats, even in an urban setting, right? Those squirrels, they deserve, some habitat as well. But they shows that we're just part of a full ecosystem. And so when we can care for the smallest and most vulnerable, then maybe we can also care for the people who are unable to make these sort of powerful political decisions as well. So it's really about building connection. I saw Winnie put her hand up.
Ooh. Oh, oops. Okay, hold on. I pulled over just for you, Nicole, just to ask a question. So, working with the community, it's very challenging. And so lots of times it comes with very frustrating moments, and also some really life enriching moments as well. And me as a community activist, my pet peeve is, everybody knows this already, incompetent politicians. And especially those who meddle when they shouldn't, or sit back and do nothing when they should. So what are some of your biggest challenges and frustrations with this work? Could be positive or negative, both. Thank you.
No problem. It's a real problem. It can be, doing this work can be defeating because there's a mountain of work that needs to be done, and in almost every direction you look, right? So from the air to the water to the food, and we're constantly being stymied, of course, by politicians who are not well read up on issues, who are not well informed, who are in fact maybe listening to people who have a vested interest in the status quo instead of people who have vested interest in health and positive outcomes for people. And so that can be frustrating. But what's most frustrating and also humanizing is understanding that everyday people want what's best for themselves, for their communities and their neighborhoods, for their children, for their elders, etc. But they're not they don't have the time and the luxury all the time to be well informed about every minute issue. And so it's really incumbent upon us to get in, recognize that people are busy, they have multiple jobs and children and other concerns, elders that need to be cared for, and of course, just time to be able to decompress. All of that, all packed within 24 hours in a day. And so it's important for us to acknowledge that everybody isn't coming with the same amount of information, but we should have a higher expectation for those elected officials who are paid to dig beyond the talking points that they receive from fossil fuel interests, and to have an open door to those people who have the community's best interest at heart, who have proven over decades to have the community's best interest at heart, and to have the foresight and the will to use their budgetary and policy pens to prepare for a future, so that that person who's very busy, who has children and elders and jobs and every other thing that they have to concern themselves with, will not have to say, oh, I have to put everything else aside so that I can become an expert on this issue because my councilman or my state representative or my national representative is doing whatever it is they're doing. I'm trying to keep it PC.
I understand.
They're doing whatever they're doing. And so I absolutely agree with you. I have very little patience for politics and political machinations. And at the same time, I recognize this is the world that we live in. And what we need to do oftentimes is inform the electorate. The politicians are very much moved by the people who vote in their district, not just the people in their district, but the people who vote in their district. And they have those names, they have them on a roll, they know who they're talking to, they know who's voting for them and who isn't. And so if we can get those folks to write letters, to make calls, to send postcards and say, hey, council person, hey, mayor, hey, state representative, hey, federal representative, excuse me, this is important to me and it needs to be important to you. These are the people who I feel are saying good things about this particular issue, and you need to listen to them. Sometimes it's a matter of the community groups helping to facilitate that through community engagement, being out at events, et cetera, informing people. But it's also important for us to recognize that everyday people, this is somebody's job, right? So it's hard for everyday people to know all the ins and outs. And so what we really want to do is empower them to with the information that's going to counteract the misinformation that they get, that they're overwhelmed with, that, oh, we can continue to live the same way and everything will be fine. Winnie, you and I were at the highway expansion meeting just a couple weeks ago, and they're talking like, oh, it'll be fine. We're gonna tear down this bridge and build 2 bridges, and the traffic will be great, and there won't be any air quality concerns as a result of it. And the people, the environmental justice and community members who were there are like, that's blatantly untrue. But the people who see $10 billion as a project, and they see, oh, what's their corner of that $10 billion that they can grab, and what are the immediate benefits that they can see, that's all they see. And so it's important for those moneyed interests to also be counteracted by people who are speaking truth to power.
Well said. Thank you.
Nicole, can you say more about what's being done to address the combined sewage overflow situation? I know that's a costly problem to try to fix, but be interesting to hear what's being done about that.
Yes. So back in 2015, the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection issued renewed permits that came with the stipulation that all permittees that have combined sewer overflows need to come up with a long-term control plan. And so they spent 6 years coming up with a long-term control plan and submitted that in 2020. All y'all know what else happened in 2020. And so there have been a few delays in processing those permits. Currently, many of the permittees are operating without permits because the DEP is still reviewing those plans. Newark is part of the Passaic Valley Sewerage Commission region. That's an acronym I'll use, PVSC. That's our water treatment facility. And I actually had a slide, I didn't include it, but I had a slide to show all of the communities that are treated by the Passaic Valley Sewerage Commission. So we have 48 hydraulically connected communities, all of which sort of come as at a nexus here in Newark. So we're at the end of 48 poop lines, if you will. And so, 8 of those communities in this region have combined sewer overflows, and that's where that sewer line is connected to the stormwater line. And so Newark, along with the rest of the PVSC region, submitted their long-term control plan in 2020, and we are still waiting for the DEP to complete their analysis of that report and to give comments and response, open it up for a draft permit. But in that time, the city, as I mentioned, has committed to managing 214 acres with green infrastructure. They, also plan to, as a region, install a parallel interceptor. So right now, if you consider sort of like the pipes coming this way and running into an interceptor, they plan to create a second one to be able to increase the flow, increase what they can take with regard to wet weather. And so all of those are examples of some of the solutions that the city and the region are working on to reduce the instances of combined sewer overflow. This is, of course, to prevent the EPA, the federal EPA, from coming in and giving a consent decree like they have to several other cities in the country. And so it's great. It was good foresight, but it is moving a little slowly. Just last month, I want to say, the DEP Commissioner Sean LaTourette sent a letter to the PVSC region encouraging them to get their costs cost-sharing agreement finalized, because he expected that the new permit would be coming fairly quickly. So we're looking forward to that, hopefully coming this spring. But to your point about the cost, how are they going to pay for this? Right now, as another slide I didn't include, see, I was trying to protect y'all. But the stormwater utility is an opportunity for people to be able to, for our permit holders, municipalities in this case, to be able to charge for runoff. That would specifically charge a large parking lot or a large warehouse that currently that rain that falls is not falling on a beautiful meadow where it's softly trickling down into the ground, or off into the river very peacefully and idyllically. Right now, it's rushing. It's rushing on man-made concourses from your roof through your storm drain and rushing to the street, where it rushes down into the sewer, and it creates flash flood conditions underground every single time it rains, right? Because we've created these really fast, we want to get it off the streets and off the roofs quickly. And so we created this system that does that, but it can quickly overwhelm. And so green infrastructure helps to slow down that process, to have some interventions, and the increased flow gray infrastructure opportunities that are included in the permit are also designed to sort of help capture more of that water, get it treated, and then be able to manage it more effectively. How is that being paid for? If we had something like a stormwater utility, as somebody who had a large parking lot or a large roof that creates a lot of runoff that would normally go into the ground, would have to pay for that runoff that currently they're not paying for. They might pay for that one flushing toilet that they have in their Amazon warehouse that all 700 of their employees have to use. They might have pay for that flushing toilet or that sink, but they don't have to pay for the runoff that their roof sort of is generating. And so a stormwater utility would assess that runoff? How much water are you putting into the sewer system as a result of your impervious surface? And so, again, with people who have a vested interest in the status quo, they might say, oh, it's a rain tax. That's not true. It's a runoff fee. And if you're creating runoff, you should have to pay for that runoff so that it can be properly managed. That's something that the city has been considering for a while, but we have not yet gotten confirmation from the city that they're pursuing it. We do want that to be pursued, and trust me, soon as I know, y'all will know, because I'll shout it from the rooftops. But that's one way to pay for it. Otherwise, are they assessing through property tax? Are they trying to increase the bills, just the water rates for people who have toilets and sinks? That's unjust, right? Because we're talking about roof runoff. We're not talking about increased water flow. So assess the proper thing for the proper charge is what we want to be the equitable solution. And those conversations are still ongoing.
And then a related question, you may have said this and I missed it. Is the city fined on days when there is an overflow that enters the rivers? Does the federal government impose any fines on that?
There are no fines because they're operating within their permit. So that's why the permit, and trust me, it's supremely frustrating to me that 50 years after the Clean Water Act, we're still just pumping untreated sewage into the river. But the truth is, they have a permit to pollute. That's what the permit is for. It's to pollute. And so that intervention of that 2015 permit says, okay, you've had your permit to pollute. You could have fixed it, but you didn't fix it. Now you have to fix it. Your permit is being adjusted. And so now you have to now you have to fix that system to reduce or eliminate the instances of combined sewer overflow. So right now, even a small rain, 10 minutes of rain, can overwhelm the city because of that rushing nature, right? Because it's so much water is happening so quickly. Even a small amount of rain will create a combined sewer overflow. And there are alerts that people can get so that people know not to recreate during those times or try to fish or anything like that. But truthfully, in my opinion, they're inadequate. And also they're not well known. A lot of people who want to, fish or boat or whatever on the river, they don't know that right now at this moment, there's toxics being spewed out of just 18 outfalls in Newark alone, not including Kearney and Harrison and East Newark and Jersey City and Bayonne. Yes.
And has there ever been any, this sounds kind of silly, but has there ever been any public education that during an intense rain, don't flush, don't run, don't do dishwashing, I've never heard that. And yet you all should be told that. Is that correct?
Yeah. So that's part of another solution that was included as one of the potential solutions to manage CSOs is water conservation. That's what they call it, water conservation. And so that's absolutely an element that people need to know about. If you can avoid it, don't run your dishwasher, don't, especially in a combined sewer overflow area. In the area where I live, where it's a separated system, my interior water is still contributing to the CSO problem, even though I don't live in a combined sewer system. So my wet weather water usage still goes to PVSC. And so I can help by reducing, I'm not running my dishwasher. I'm definitely not doing something like watering the lawn or something like that. But watering the lawn would have less of an effect in the MS4 area where I live, because that water goes directly and untreated, mind you, directly into the Elizabeth River, because I live in the West Ward. And so to your point, Susan, we haven't had, and this is part of a new permit for MS4 areas, which is a watershed management plan about reducing litter and pollution directly into the storm drains in separated sewer areas, because that never goes to the water treatment facility. So if somebody dumps something into the storm drain, that goes untreated directly into the river. And it's never stopped. And so the fact that there needs to be water conservation efforts, low flow systems in place. People need to learn how to use low flow systems because they can't use them the same way. When there's 40 gallons of water flushing whatever you put in the toilet away, you can't do the same thing as when there's only 5 gallons or 2 gallons being used.
But if that's true, I'm always interested in figuring out what are the messages that we're not getting out that are really comprehensible because they're short and you can get it and you can keep it in mind. And that would be one that seems a no-brainer, that during an intense rain, don't flush, don't do your dishwasher, don't do your laundry. I mean, that's just wait on it. You know, that's something that everybody could get, but I don't think there's ever been a concerted effort to get that message out. And
it should be. I remember when they were going through the long-term control plan, I was like, where's the budget? Can I tell you, budgets? You can learn a lot about people's priorities by looking at the budget that they submit along with a particular thing. So if you look at the long-term control plan budgets, freaking millions of dollars for their tunnels and their storage tanks. How much money do they have? Oh, it's undefined. It's undetermined. Yeah, we'll spend it when we get to it. If you do not budget it, you will not do it. There's no money associated with that. Then that means that they're not going to do it. Oh yeah. What are the things that we could do? Oh yeah, it's water conservation, it's education. Like, plan for it, budget for it. These are things that you have to plan and pay for.
You mean the messaging?
The messaging, not only messaging, but also giving, how are we giving people low flow shower heads, low flow toilets, filters on their washing machines, so that they can keep some of the pollutants out of the waterways. Like, there's lots of, direct interventions that the city can help facilitate, but they have to be planned for.
I have a question. You spoke about, you guys went to the on topic but off to the highway expansion meeting. What highway are they talking about expanding, and when?
So there's 16 bridges in the turnpike that are past their useful life. That's the terminology they're using. Past their useful life, and they are being torn down. And the New Jersey Transit Authority has shared their proposed plans for the first stretch, phase 1. I want to say, where is it, Winnie, exactly between? It's like between Newark, I want to say in Bayonne or Jersey City, but
Yeah, it's the Bayonne.
yeah,
Bridge.
so
Yeah.
the Bayonne Bridge is the major sort of project, but there's several bridges. So there's 16 bridges altogether, and they plan to not just tear down and rebuild the existing bridges, but to expand the capacity of the system. And so for that Bayonne Bridge there, the one that connects Bayonne and Newark, that bridge, they're going to, instead of just tearing down, I'm sorry, I'm literally talking, Precious. You're gonna have to come back. I'm sorry, excuse me.
Movie stuff.
Okay, sorry about that. It was amazing. It was an hour and a half movie. I've only been on this call for like an hour. Where does the time go? But yes, so the expansion there, they plan to tear down that bridge, build another bridge. So they're going to have that bridge operating, build a bridge, shut down the first bridge and tear it down, move the traffic to the newly built bridge, and tear down the existing bridge, and then build a second bridge. So they plan to have 2 bridges where currently they have 1 bridge. So they'll have 4 lanes in each direction, because right now they have 2 lanes in each direction.
Oh.
And what their argument is that they can't just rebuild the bridge and just build one bridge because that bridge is already over capacity. Instead of using those funds to increase transit opportunities, to make it easier for people to take a train or a bus or some other mass transit, they're going to make it easier for people to have one person in their single vehicle cross the bridge. And of course, we know from 40 years of highway expansions that induced demand will make those congestion gains nil inside of a decade. And truthfully, that if that was the only concern, it would be enough. But we don't have the kind of time, climate speaking, we don't have the, it's just a complete head in the sand about the way that we can continue our lifestyle. And the fact that we should be putting money towards mass transit. How can we improve and encourage transit options so that people can use transit and it's the best option, instead of, oh, I need to get to Jersey City. It's best for me to get in my car right now and drive to Jersey City. Whereas if we increase and improve transit options, I can say, oh, it's cheaper, faster, and better for me to take mass transit to get to Jersey City. That's what we should be doing and using those funds for. And that's currently not the case.
Yeah, and they're not even addressing the Holland Tunnel, in terms of the bottleneck. And
Yeah,
I think it's like 29 bridges, I
60.
believe.
60.
Yeah,
So
it's ridiculous.
and they actually had the nerve to say that none of this increased traffic would be going to the Holland Tunnel.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
With a straight face. I was like, oh, this will not increase traffic into Jersey City. I'm like, that's the whole point of it.
Oh,
And they said that they were at the beginning of the design phase, but they already have renderings. They have, sort of, what do you call them? The animated renderings. They know exactly where their stormwater detention systems are going to go. And, they say, oh, this will improve stormwater management. And they're like, how do you know that if you haven't done design work? Well, we've done some preliminary design. It's like, and they also plan to break ground in 2026. So we're already into the second quarter of 2020. We're almost into the second quarter of 2024, and they're already going to break ground in 2026. They've already started doing design work. Like we're 18 months away from that. Like, obviously, they've already started this work. So there's a lot that we're not necessarily being told, and some things that we're being told selectively.
you think there could be an intervention?
I'll be honest and say no, I don't think that there's much that we can do to stop this, but there should be ways in which community groups can band together and get community benefit agreements to get some positivity out of this. And so what can communities do? We still need to sit down with them and sort of figure out exactly what are the harms, because we know there will be harms, and how can we mitigate against those harms. So right now they're saying, oh, it's just going to be great, great, great for everybody. And we know that's not true.
Is this New Jersey Department of Transportation? That should be on their website, this information, Nicole?
Yes, you can find more at NJTA, the New Jersey Transit Authority. I have a link to that somewhere. The madness behind me, I cannot.
Yeah, because you got me thinking, because they're doing something over here on 280. Something down here, and I have to go back and look and see where they said, because it was just a form letter, dear neighbor, we're working in your area. I said, but this is after the effect that you're out here working. So.
One more question, Nicole, on the native plants and gardens and trees. I know there's just lots of good work on street trees and tree by tree and the kind of big trees that New Jersey Tree Foundation does. There is also this more accelerated impact of microforests and tiny forests, densely planted native forests. And that's a more complicated concept. It took me years to understand how impactful these will be. And I like trees and had been thinking, so I mean, but what I'm trying to get to is that's a way to flip, and I use that word flip because I hate when it's used politically, but flip a hot, hard heating surface, a hot plate surface in Newark, and of which there are many, to a catching the sunlight before it hits. So it's a very, very big impact thing in not too many years. Since the mayor has said 1 million trees is a commitment, what is the best way of getting to the right people to get this pretty complicated information that this is not just trees, this is creating an ecosystem block by block with learning space. It doesn't have to take up the whole space. It's just so beneficial. Who would you recommend a sit down with to kind of get that information? You have to focus at least for 20 minutes. You have to know that there's one that's going to be built on Roosevelt Islands. That's going to be very high profile about the whole mini forest, microforest idea. It's coming up on April 6th. That's a real opportunity to say, look, this is happening. So let's let Newark be a leader.
Yeah. Well, just focus on trees, because I think the mini forest issue is a bit of a separate issue, similar to how green infrastructure is a separate issue, even though they're all sort of related. Newark is very densely populated and is very urban. And so when we look at even our closest suburban neighbors have much less density, much less impervious surface. And so when we look at Newark, and how people live, the fact that we still have housing security issues and various other issues, people are concerned about that balance between how can we have improved green and open space, but also make sure that people are able to be properly housed safely and affordably. And so when we talk about trees, the mayor is absolutely committed. Everything that he's been saying, excuse me. The mayor's absolutely committed, and everything he's been saying. We recently hired a new tree supervisor that's housed in the Department of Public Works, Ryan Metz, and he's currently looking into several tree planting opportunities, both street trees as well as in parks and some of our traffic islands. And so, going to your point about the mini forest, street trees are they are what they are. They have a limited lifespan. They're usually used and abused. And also, it depends on the benefit that we're trying to get, but every single benefit that a tree has comes decades after it's planted. And so the trees that we plant today are going to be of maximum benefit in a decade or more. And so the street trees, there's been a concerted effort to make sure that those are sort of more smaller trees, so that they don't interfere power lines. We don't have PSE&G coming in and cutting them into abhorrent shapes and lopping off branches and various other things. So keeping them under the power lines, which in my opinion is a whole nother environmental justice issue. So if you go to South Orange, there's plenty of street trees because guess what? They don't have power lines on the street. But I've already taken up all of your time. So there's that. But within our parks and our traffic triangles are more of an opportunity to create those little ecosystems that you mentioned, Susan. And so there's several entities that are working towards that. Of course, I mentioned Ryan with DPW. There's a whole tree team there. Several groups, NewarkDIG, and several of our partners, as well as several of our parks partners as well, are focused on improving the parks, not only for the usage of people there, but also for capturing toxins, capturing greenhouse gases, improving wildlife habitat, et cetera. And so it's really a matter of getting all of those entities together and making sure that we're all having the same conversation about these benefits and how we can best maximize the resources that we have. If we're putting trees in the ground, how are we doing that? What are the trees? How are they native? Are they providing ecosystems? Are we doing multiple levels, not just trees that are all going to be here, but also native grasses and other kinds of things that are going to provide the kind of on the ground ecosystem, as well, of course, stormwater capture and management.
Right. And it's Brian Metz, M-E-T-Z?
Ryan. Yes, I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, great.
So Nicole, in closing, what is like a short cheat sheet, that we can share in our circles with our block associations, with our social agencies, that we can share with everyday folk on what they should do and trying to assist the flooding, like when you're saying that and when there's rain, you shouldn't use devices that require water, such as washing machines, such as dishwashers, such as showers. What do you have something like that, or can you create something like that? That we could share.
I think to Susan's point, some of that water conservation effort is something that the Green Team specifically can work on and create. I know that NewarkDIG, we had a sort of what can residents do brochure that we had a little while ago with regard specifically to stormwater management and various things that people could do on private property. And we're hoping to expand that to make sure that people know about more private property opportunities. But yeah, that's something that, we can sort of create something, because there's so many opportunities, right? But for the large things, it's really a matter of people being informed that this is a problem and holding their elected officials accountable. So when, if your councilman comes to your block association group, ask them, hey, what's going on with the cost sharing agreement for the long-term control plan? And that person might blink at you because they don't know, because they have not been read into it, but they should be. And so that might be something that they jot down and go get educated on, and they find out more so that they can be informed. Sometimes it's really a matter of, bring things to their awareness. They're human beings. So you just gotta just put the bugs in their ear. But yeah, we can get back to you with something that's specifically for sort of, residents and regular people.
May I ask one quick question, please? And maybe it has already been answered. I have to apologize. When you first started speaking, you were talking about a lot of the health issues, and it kind of really made my stomach almost ache. So what type of information is being passed or being collected on those large scales of health issues for families when it comes to, I know where I live, I live in Virginia, and there's a large amount of dialysis, centers opening because of people with kidney issues. And I know the toxicity goes to the kidney, goes to your livers, heart conditions. So how is that information being collected in that dense area?
I know we have limited amount of time, but I'll try to be concise. But that's an issue that is near and dear to my heart, because the negative health effects of all of these environmental challenges are absolutely true, and they're absolutely imperative that we study them. And at the same time, so many polluters and others are able to hide behind the restrictions that we have about getting health data. So many of our health professionals are restricted from giving us health data that's too granular, because if we get it on a census block group, for example, we might be able to identify individual patients. And so then they can't give us that. So they might give it to us on a countywide basis, where I'm like, we need to know the issues that are happening in Newark. And so, we're caught between, wanting to protect people and their medical issues, and also needing the data to be able to have the anecdotal push that we need for our political leaders to be able to make the proper changes that they have. So that's a whole nother issue. We can have a whole different conversation about that as well. But there is data. It's just so parsed, and it's
Yeah.
not exactly useful. I wish there was a way for it to be,
Well,
you know,
let me ask
protected
you
and
this.
used. Mhm.
Yeah, let me ask you this quick question. So maybe even if you all found one pilot area, just take a pilot area, if they would consent, that those community members would consent to their health being, published or being taken, you can just take one group or two groups and get that data. Shop, maybe
Yeah,
that way.
I feel like from a scientific perspective,
Mm-hmm.
that might be, I mean, there's all kinds of studies that are done
Yeah.
regularly. It's just what would be the usefulness and the veracity,
Yes.
like what's the
Yes,
sample
I understand.
size, what's the
Yes, I
comparison,
understand.
is it this
Right.
area versus that area? There's
Right.
a lot of questions, but I
You
think
gotta
that there
start
does need
somewhere.
to be some innovative thought and, some opportunity and solutions put to the problem, because we can't have the right arguments if people can hide behind a lack of
Yeah.
and a lack of clarity.
Yeah. Thank you.
Julia has had her hand up for a while, so let's take that one last question or comment, and then we'll close out.
Well, I hope this doesn't take us in a completely off topic, but as you know, I think, Nicole, Newark is the largest property owner in the Highlands. Newark owns 35,000 acres and 5 reservoirs. Newark manages those reservoirs, sells water to its neighboring communities, and how those 35,000 acres are managed to protect water quality and ensure a water supply is important. On Monday, I sit on the board of the Pinchot Institute, and Gifford Pinchot helped establish the U.S. Forest Service. We are going to Washington and have a meeting with the U.S. Forest Service. There is a lot of money available through the Inflation Reduction Act to the U.S. Forest Service. And we're going to ask that there be a grant to help Newark develop a management plan for the property that it owns to protect its water supply. And I'm just wondering if you think that that will be welcome in the city, and if you might help us reach the right people, because we've had a hard time getting anybody to get back to us from the city about this. It's recent. I'm not pointing any fingers. I just would love to have some help reaching the right people.
So now it got too quiet.
Always
So-
dangerous.
Yeah, right. So absolutely, I think that the Highlands brings up the property that Newark owns, our wonderful, delicious water, of which I know that all of our surrounding towns are super jealous of. Whenever I go to East Orange and I have their gross water, I'm like, oh, I got to get back to Newark. So I think that there's several conversations that need to be had about sort of like how that property is managed, not least of which how other entities and how adjacent properties are affecting the water quality there. There's very little control over the toxins and fertilizers and other things that are sort of our neighbors in those areas are putting into the river, let alone PSE&G trying to maintain their sort of like power line area and the herbicides that are dumped in that area. And so there's a lot, I think, of sort of like forestry management that needs to be dealt with. The city of Newark just got $8 million actually from the U.S. Forest Grant for its urban forestry work to be able to plant trees and do various other trainings. And so I'm sure that they will welcome more money from the forest, from the U.S. Forestry for its work in the Highlands. But I think at the very basic level, more Newarkers need to know about the property that they own.
Don't get me going on that. It's very frustrating.
Yes, that it is a resource, that this is Newark's property, that this is the source of Newark's delicious water, and that more people should be engaged, not only to take advantage of it as a recreational resource, but then also as an item that needs to be protected. And yes, of course, happy to have an offline conversation with you about who to talk with in the city and how to get maybe letter of support or whatever it is that you need for
Thank you.
pursuing that grant.
Thank you, Nicole, for coming and for your presentation.
Thank you.
Great, Nicole.
I know it was a lot. It's a lot. And there's so much more. We didn't hardly talk about food. We didn't talk about waste. There's so much more.